Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping into a world far removed from comfort and convenience, a time when survival was a full-time job. Picture this: disease runs rampant, justice is swift and brutal, and your dinner might just be a bowl of boiled roots if you're lucky. We're pulling back the curtain on what life really looked like during the Middle Ages. Spoiler alert, it's not the glamorous fairy tale you've been fed by storybooks or blockbuster films. There were no noble quests or glittering banquets, just mud, misery, and monotony. Trust me, you wouldn't make it past breakfast. Before we dive into this gritty reality, hit that like button if you're into honest, unfiltered history. And if you enjoy these immersive journeys through time, consider subscribing, but only if you truly want to stick around for more. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see how many corners of the globe we bring together in these time travel sessions. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. Now, set the mood. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that ambient hum. It adds a little something, trust me. Take a deep breath. You're not just watching a video, you're about to be there. Congratulations! You've just opened your eyes in the year 1325. The upside? You're breathing. The downside? So are the hundreds of tiny, biting passengers sharing your bed. You're lying on what can barely be called a mattress, just a flattened pile of straw riddled with insects, flattened by time and damp with the musty scent of rot. That straw? It was swept off a stable floor not long ago. Think natural bedding, but without any of the benefits. There's no such thing as a memory foam pillow, no clean linens, no softness of Egyptian cotton, just a coarse wool blanket caked in a year's worth of filth and bodily odors. It's so heavy with grime it could double as livestock. And privacy? That's a luxury no one in your social class can afford. You don't have a bedroom. There are no doors to close, no curtains to draw, no sanctuary to hide in. Just a single open room where your entire family, siblings, parents, maybe even a cousin who just never left, are all waking up within arm's reach. You share the space with the animals too, of course. Chickens cluck beside your straw mat, a goat nuzzles your blanket, and mice scurry across the beams above. It's a full house, one big, breathing, snoring, scratching organism. This isn't solitude. This is medieval togetherness, where your only personal space is the distance you can carve out with your elbows. And here's the kicker: the day has barely started. You've managed to claw your way out of your haystack of discomfort. Congratulations! Now your body has another urgent message. Nature calls. Loudly. And with no patience. Now's the moment where you start missing modern plumbing like a long-lost friend. Because here, there's no bathroom, no toilet seat, no toilet paper, no shiny handle to flush, not even a dusty old plunger lurking in the corner. What you have is something far less glamorous and far more interactive. If you're among the rural poor, your restroom is probably a wooden bucket behind the hut. But don't expect a clean experience. That bucket is likely already full to the brim because Uncle Stan had a bit too much turnip stew the night before. The stench is overpowering. You try not to breathe through your nose, but it finds you anyway. Once you've done what you had to do, there's no sewage system waiting to carry it away. Instead, you're expected to dispose of it manually. Most people just hurl it into the street. Yes, the street. And tradition says you're supposed to shout, "Garde-à-l'eau," a garbled echo of Old French meaning, "watch out below," before emptying the contents out the window. But let's be honest, no one ever moves fast enough. Urban streets in medieval Europe are less like roads and more like open-air drainage systems. Picture a sluggish, foul-smelling stream of human waste animal dung, and ominous brown puddles that defy explanation. You don't walk down the street. You navigate it like an obstacle course for the senses. And if you live in a more developed town, lucky you. You might have access to public latrines. But don't celebrate just yet. These are long communal wooden benches with several holes. No partitions, no privacy, just you and a lineup of strangers all doing their business side by side. It's less like a bathroom and more like a medieval group therapy session, except no one makes eye contact. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. Toilet paper? Never even a concept. People make do with whatever's nearby. Clumps of straw, bunches of leaves, scraps of old fabric, moss if they're feeling fancy, and in rare cases, rough bits of wool. Some folks just skip that step entirely, which might explain why people preferred bowing over shaking hands. And if you're holding out hope that castle life offers a bit more sophistication, it's time for a reality check. Sure, nobility had stone walls and guards, but when it came to hygiene, things didn't exactly improve. They just got fancier in theory, not function. Instead of a chamber pot or a bucket, you might find what's called a garderobe, a private little stone alcove, usually built into the side of the castle. Sounds luxurious until you realize it's just a hole in the wall that drops your waist straight into the moat or a pit below. A practical solution? Maybe. But not exactly secure. Because yes, enemy soldiers have been known to climb into castles through these sewage shafts during sieges. Nothing says element of surprise like an invasion via the latrine chute. So much for luxury. Whether you're a lowly field worker or a well-fed noble, one thing unites you. The medieval bathroom experience is never dignified. It's cold, unsanitary, often dangerously slippery, and permanently unpleasant. One wrong step on a mossy stone path, and you're taking an unplanned dive into yesterday's leftovers, and not the edible kind. And by the way, you still haven't brushed your teeth. But we'll get to that mess in just a moment. For now, congrats. You've survived the gauntlet that is the medieval toilet. Surely that earns you a moment of comfort, right? Maybe a hot breakfast? Something hearty to start the day? Unfortunately, this isn't brunch in a cozy cafe. This is medieval Europe, and nothing here is warm, inviting, or designed for enjoyment. Breakfast, if you can even call it that, is more of a nutritional obligation than a meal. There are no golden eggs, no steaming coffee, and certainly no artisanal bread with imported butter. Instead, you crouch near the hearth, if your home even has one, clutching a rough wooden bowl filled with something that looks suspiciously like wet cement. Welcome to pottage, the backbone of the medieval peasant diet. It's a grayish, gluey stew made from anything remotely edible: cracked grains, root vegetables, dried peas, and occasionally, if you're blessed, a stray bean. It's been bubbling for days, maybe even weeks. No one washes the pot. New ingredients are just tossed in as needed, creating a soupy, ever-evolving mash of leftovers. It's less of a meal and more of a community science project that never ends. Whether you're a lowly field worker or a well-fed noble, one thing unites you. The medieval bathroom experience is never dignified. It's cold, unsanitary, often dangerously slippery, and permanently unpleasant. One wrong step on a mossy stone path, and you're taking an unplanned dive into yesterday's leftovers, and not the edible kind. And by the way, you still haven't brushed your teeth. But we'll get to that mess in just a moment. For now, congrats. You've survived the gauntlet that is the medieval toilet. Surely that earns you a moment of comfort, right? Maybe a hot breakfast? Something hearty to start the day? Unfortunately, this isn't brunch in a cozy cafe. This is medieval Europe, and nothing here is warm, inviting, or designed for enjoyment. Breakfast, if you can even call it that, is more of a nutritional obligation than a meal. There are no golden eggs, no steaming coffee, and certainly no artisanal bread with imported butter. Instead, you crouch near the hearth, if your home even has one, clutching a rough wooden bowl filled with something that looks suspiciously like wet cement. Welcome to pottage, the backbone of the medieval peasant diet. It's a grayish, gluey stew made from anything remotely edible: cracked grains, root vegetables, dried peas, and occasionally, if you're blessed, a stray bean. It's been bubbling for days, maybe even weeks. No one washes the pot. New ingredients are just tossed in as needed, creating a soupy, ever-evolving mash of leftovers. It's less of a meal and more of a community science project that never ends. On the side, you get a chunk of bread. And this isn't the fluffy, crusty kind that comes with dipping oil and compliments. This loaf is dense. It's dark. It's been made with rye, barley, or oats. Wheat is too expensive. To stretch the flour, bakers sometimes add fillers like ground-up acorns, sawdust, or even chalk. Yes, chalk. It's so hard it could double as a tool. You don't bite this bread. You break it with effort or soften it by soaking it in your soup like gruel. And to drink? Forget orange juice. Forget oat milk lattes. Water, in most places, is dangerous, teeming with bacteria, waste runoff, and parasites invisible to the eye but devastating to the gut. So, what do you sip at dawn? Beer. Yes, beer, and not the strong kind. A weak, watered-down ale brewed to kill off the germs and keep people hydrated. Even children drink it, not for pleasure, but because it's safer than what comes out of the well. Nobody's tipsy at sunrise, but at least it won't put you in the grave. Today, thinking about meat or cheese? Don't. Those are reserved for feast days, holidays, and divine miracles. Most commoners eat meat only a few times a year, if that, and even then, it's often the stringy, chewy bits left behind by the more powerful. Fresh fruit is rare, eaten only in season, and usually reserved for fermenting into wine. Spices? Pure fantasy. A small pouch of pepper could cost more than you earn in a month. Salt is so valuable it's sometimes locked away like treasure. So you chew through your flavorless rations, sip your medieval safety brew, and try very hard not to think about the rat that might have wandered too close to the cooking pot while you slept. Breakfast doesn't energize you. It burdens you. It's something you endure. And now that your stomach is barely settled, it's time to face the day's real challenge. Work. Relentless, back-breaking, day-long labor that decides whether you eat again or not. There are no weekends, no paid time off. If you don't work, you don't survive. Simple as that. But before you even lift a finger, you need to get dressed. Not that it'll do much to change your situation. Your wardrobe is minimal. You own one outfit. That's it. A single woolen tunic if you're a man, or a linen shift if you're a woman. Maybe a rough underlayer if you're lucky, though most people aren't. There's no rotating closet, no seasonal trends, and certainly no laundry day. Clothes are worn daily until they wear out, fall apart, or get eaten by mildew. Underwear? Let's just say optional is being generous. Most people went about their days with nothing but scratchy, sweat-soaked wool rubbing against bare skin, layers lovingly stitched together by someone whose idea of tailoring was make a hole for the head and hope for the best. These clothes weren't fitted. They weren't breathable. They were itchy, heavy, and held the personal scent of their owner like a curse. Laundry day? That's not a thing. No detergent. No washing machine. No dry cleaner lurking around the corner. Just garments so stained, stiff, and crusted with filth they could probably walk themselves to the fire pit. If you did want to wash them, it meant an all-day ordeal, hauling buckets of water from a distant well or sluggish river, lighting a fire, heating that water, then scrubbing each item by hand using ashes, or if you were lucky, a little lye. And good luck drying anything, especially when sunshine is a quarterly visitor and rain is your daily co-host. And shoes? Prepare to be disappointed. If you own footwear at all, it's nothing more than a glorified sack of leather, untreated, misshapen, and stitched with the tears of someone who definitely wasn't a cobbler. They have the structural integrity of a tortilla and offer about as much protection. Most peasants skipped shoes entirely, choosing to walk barefoot through mud, dung, sharp stones, and puddles that were more biohazard than water. What does that mean for you? Your skin becomes a battleground. You're scratching constantly, not because you're being dramatic, but because your body is a five-star resort for fleas, lice, and bedbugs. These aren't rare nuisances, they're just part of the cast. Everyone has them. Monks, children, knights, even the highborn are walking bug hotels. You'll be chatting with a village priest while absent-mindedly scraping your armpit with a kitchen utensil, and no one will even blink. Your scalp? Raw. Your neck? Riddled with welts. And if you develop a rash? Tough luck. No one's going to diagnose you. No creams. No bombs. No friendly local pharmacist whispering, "It's probably just an allergic reaction." You endure. And if it doesn't get infected, then congratulations. You've just gained a new, long-term skin companion. Say hello to 6 months of burning discomfort with zero hope for relief. Now that you're wrapped in misery and have enough pests to start your own medieval zoo, it's time to go outside and start working yourself into the dirt. But wait, before all that grueling labor, let's flash that winning morning smile. Except you don't. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. Because smiling in the 1300s isn't just risky socially, it's downright horrifying dentally. Oral hygiene is less of a habit and more of a mythical concept. There's no toothbrush waiting on a little ceramic holder. No minty toothpaste. No floss. No mouthwash. No freshening up. If anyone did care about their teeth, they might chew on a stick or rinse their mouth with vinegar or old wine. That's it. By your mid-20s, which, remember, is already considered middle-aged, your teeth look like something a grave robber would hesitate to touch. Cavities are common. Gums are inflamed. Breath smells like a barn fire. And those brown stains? Not coffee. Just slow, rotting decay from a lifetime of chewing gritty, fibrous food filled with particles of stone and dirt, thanks to rough milling techniques. Ironically, the rich had it worse in some ways. Sugar was just starting to make its way into European diets, imported at staggering cost and flaunted as a luxury. Nobles indulged in sugary pastries and preserves, not realizing it was silently destroying their mouths faster than any peasant's porridge ever could. So if you were lucky enough to be poor, you at least rotted at a slower pace. And toothaches? Constant. They become background noise, like birdsong, only painful. The kind of nagging, pulsating throb that makes you reconsider every life choice. Your options for relief? Limited. Prayers. Home-brewed remedies. Or, and this was surprisingly common, just rip the thing out. But don't think that meant a visit to a dentist. Dentists didn't exist yet. Instead, meet the barber surgeon, the multitasking medieval professional who would cut your hair, lance your boils, and yank your teeth all in one horrifying appointment. Anesthetics? Not a thing. Lighting? Candlelight. Tools? Hooks and brute strength. It was scream or pass out medicine. And if the tooth was infected? That's when things got serious. Infections could spread fast. With no antibiotics, what started as a bad molar could spiral into sepsis, a full-body infection that could kill you within days. Imagine dying from something that today would be treated with a $4 prescription and an awkward dentist visit. So no one's smiling in the Middle Ages. Not because they're sad, but because revealing your teeth is like showing off a crime scene. Kissing? Risky. Halitosis? Ubiquitous. Intimacy? It came with aromatic consequences. Now that your back is officially on fire from 12 hours of unpaid squatting in a field, let's talk about the weather. Because in the Middle Ages, climate isn't just something you complain about, it's your daily tormentor. The seasons don't come with cozy aesthetics or pumpkin spice lattes. They come with suffering. Winter first. Sounds kind of magical. Snow, firelight, maybe a fur cloak? Nope. You're freezing to death in a hut that offers the same insulation as a stack of wet cardboard. Your walls are made of wood or wattle and daub, and sealed with mud. Gaps in the walls let the wind through like it's on a guided tour. Windows? A joke. Just a hole with some cloth nailed over it. The hearth? Sure, you've got a fire, when you can afford the wood. But that wood? It's expensive, and in many places, it's illegal to gather from the wrong forest. Yes, illegal. Some lord owns the trees, and if you pick up the wrong stick, congratulations, that's theft. In some areas, it's punishable by death. For firewood. In winter. So you're cold. Your breath fogs the air inside your home. Your one wool tunic? Damp. Your feet? Always wet. Your fingers? Stiff, red, and halfway to falling off. Frostbite doesn't get diagnosed. It just happens. Oh look, another black toe. Hope it falls off clean this time. And summer? Don't get excited. Your home now turns into a medieval Dutch oven. The same walls that let in winter wind now trap summer heat like a sadistic sauna. You're sweating through 3 layers of unwashed wool, but can't strip down, because modesty is a thing, and exposing too much skin is scandalous. Plus, the sun is brutal. No sunscreen. No hats. Just pray your nose doesn't blister. Then come the insects. Swarms of flies, mosquitoes the size of your thumb, and fleas that never left in the first place. You're constantly slapping, scratching, or just accepting that you are now one with the bugs. Your bed is full of them. Your hair is a flea metropolis. You are a walking buffet for anything with wings or legs. And there's no such thing as a comfortable temperature. There's just wet, hot, cold, or I think I'm hallucinating from heat stroke. There's no indoor refuge. No escape. You live and die in this weather, and whether it kills you quickly or slowly depends entirely on luck. But hey, at least the seasons change, right? Now let's say you survive the weather. Let's say you get through your workday without collapsing, freezing, or melting. You finally drag yourself home, exhausted. Time for a relaxing evening? Not a chance. Dinner is more pottage. That same eternal stew, now with maybe a hint of wild onion or yesterday's rat. If your village is near a forest, you might have foraged a few mushrooms, hopefully not the kind that makes your stomach turn inside out. Bread? Still a rock. Beer? Still your only hydration option. You eat sitting on a dirt floor. You don't really talk with your family. You grunt between bites and try not to fall asleep mid-chew. There's no evening entertainment, unless you count staring at the fire and trying not to think about mortality. And when night falls, you crawl back into your straw mattress of sadness. The bugs welcome you like old friends. The cold wraps around your bones. The smell, human, animal, mold, and smoke, fills the air like a medieval cologne. If you're lucky, you sleep. If you're unlucky, you toss and turn while someone next to you snores and a flea colonizes your earlobe. Because that's life in the 14th century. Brutal. Relentless. Infested. And we're only halfway through the day. You wake up not to the gentle rays of a sunrise, but to the overwhelming assault of buzzing insects, flies, drawn in swarms by the pungent odor of your unwashed skin and the rotting stew that's been decomposing in the corner for days. Mosquitoes dance relentlessly around your face, piercing the silence, if you can even call it that, with their infuriating whine. Any hope of restful sleep is shattered by the constant clamor of shouting neighbors, wailing infants, and the creaking of warped wooden walls. When morning comes, there's no relief, only the unyielding heat of the sun baking down on you as you toil in the fields. Forget sunblock or even a proper hat. If you're lucky, you've twisted some straw into a makeshift head covering that barely protects you, making you look less like a laborer and more like a human scarecrow. And no, work doesn't pause because of the weather. If you collapse from exhaustion and dehydration, they'll just say you've taken a turn. That's the reality. You're either trembling under a pile of thin, scratchy rags during the brutal winter nights, wondering if frostbite will claim your toes, or you're soaked in sweat beneath the blistering sun, your thighs raw from chafing, your single pair of socks soaked and sour. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. But perhaps the most unrelenting part of it all is the consistency. No matter the season, some things never change. Your clothes, made from coarse, abrasive fabric, continue to torment your skin. The food remains bland, monotonous, and barely nutritious, often little more than a broth made from scraps. And always, always, there's another grueling task awaiting you, another day to survive. Welcome to medieval life, where climate control is just a fantasy, and you're left at the mercy of the elements. Feeling parched? Want to wash your face, maybe rinse away the grime of the previous day and reclaim some shred of dignity? Too bad. In the Middle Ages, water wasn't a source of relief, it was a silent threat, an invisible killer cloaked in clarity. Let's talk hydration. That babbling stream nearby might look as if it belongs in a fairy tale. Cool, crisp, and inviting. But what you don't see is what's happening upstream. Someone may have just emptied a chamber pot into it. Or worse, a decomposing carcass could be rotting just around the bend. Every sip carries a gamble. Parasites, bacteria, and a microscopic army of medieval pathogens lurk beneath the surface. That's why beer became the beverage of choice. And we're not talking about party beer. This was small beer, a low-alcohol brew consumed even by children. It was less about the buzz and more about survival, as the brewing process involved boiling the water, making it safer than the contaminated runoff seeping through the village. Wine. That was an option too, but only for those with the wealth to afford it and the luxury to start their day half-drunk. But what about bathing? Surely water served for hygiene, right? In theory, yes. In reality, not so much. Back then, it was widely believed that bathing could be dangerous, that warm water opened the pores and let in disease. Ironically, it was thought to be healthier to keep your grime intact, the thick coating of sweat and dirt serving as a sort of grimy barrier against illness. Communal bathhouses did exist for a time, offering a place to scrub away the filth, but they quickly became infamous for gossip, scandal, and extracurricular activities that didn't sit well with religious authorities. Unsurprisingly, many were shut down by the church, deemed morally corrupt and spiritually hazardous. And if you still insisted on bathing at home, it was no small feat. First, you'd have to draw water from the well, drag it back, light a fire to heat it, and fill a leaky wooden tub, all for a bath that might already be claimed by someone else in the household. Or worse, someone might use it after you, turning the water into a grimy, lukewarm soup of sweat and skin cells. As for rainwater, people did collect it, but let's not romanticize that either. It pooled in open barrels, exposed to bird droppings, breeding insects, and a carpet of slimy green moss. There was no purification, no filtration, just nature, raw and unsanitized. Whether you were drinking it, bathing in it, or using it to water your food, water in the Middle Ages wasn't just a necessity, it was a gamble with your life. And in this harsh world, every drop came with a cost. In the medieval era, personal hygiene was a rare luxury. The pungent aroma of unwashed bodies mingled with the lingering scent of last week's goat stew fermenting in the corner, creating an environment that attracted swarms of flies. Mosquitoes buzzed incessantly around your ears as you tried to sleep, assuming you could ignore the cacophony of neighbors arguing and babies crying through the thin walls. The relentless sun scorched the fields, and without sunblock or a proper hat, unless you crafted one from straw like a desperate scarecrow, you were left vulnerable to the elements. Despite the oppressive heat, work was unavoidable. Heatstroke was casually referred to as taking a bad turn. In winter, you shivered in your hovel, wondering if your frostbitten toes would survive until spring. In summer, you sweated through your only pair of socks, your thighs chafing painfully. Regardless of the season, your clothes itched, your food remained unappetizing, and the next grueling task awaited you. Welcome to medieval climate control, non-existent. Feeling thirsty? Hoping to freshen up or splash some water on your face to escape this damp fever dream of a life? Too bad. In medieval times, water wasn't your ally, it was a silent threat. Let's begin with drinking. The nearby stream might appear fresh, bubbling, and clear, reminiscent of a fantasy movie scene. But here's the twist. Upstream, someone likely emptied a chamber pot into it. If not that, perhaps a dead pig was decomposing nearby. Parasites, bacteria, and the entire microbial army of medieval Europe lurked in every sip. That's why people, including children, drank beer. Not the kind that leads to revelry, but small beer, low in alcohol, high in survival value. Brewing involved boiling the water, making it safer than the contaminated streams. Wine was another option, but only if you were wealthy enough to afford it and indifferent to functioning properly before noon. What about bathing? Surely water was used for cleaning, right? In theory, yes. In practice, absolutely not. Back then, people believed that bathing opened your pores, allowing diseases to enter. Washing yourself was considered medically risky. You were deemed cleaner if you never removed the protective layer of filth caked onto your skin. Communal bathhouses did exist but quickly gained reputations as hubs for gossip, scandal, and sometimes illicit activities. Naturally, the church intervened and shut many down. Even if you desired a bath, it was a full production. Fetching water from the well, boiling it over a fire, filling a leaky wooden tub, and praying no one else used it before, or worse, after you. Rainwater collected in open barrels was no better, often contaminated with bird droppings, insect larvae, and thriving moss. Refreshing? Not quite. Whether it's for drinking, bathing, or watering crops, water in the Middle Ages was less a life source and more a gamble. One wrong gulp, and you could spend your final days sweating in a straw bed, clutching your stomach, and contemplating all your life choices. Next time you sip tap water, raise a glass for our ancestors. They didn't have the luxury of hydration without hazard. So, you drank the water, or maybe you didn't. Perhaps you just stubbed your toe on a rock shaped like disappointment. Either way, you're sick. You need help. You need a doctor. Too bad you live in the Middle Ages, where medicine is essentially polite torture with a theology degree. Let's start with the diagnosis. Everything wrong with you, be it a cough, rash, broken bone, or the creeping plague, is attributed to your humors being out of balance. The four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, were believed to govern your health, requiring a delicate internal balance. Got a fever? Too much blood. The solution: bloodletting. That's right, draining your life force into a bowl using a dull blade or a hungry leech. Barbers often performed this procedure, offering a haircut and hemoglobin extraction in one sitting. Feeling sad or anxious? Clearly an excess of black bile. The cure? Laxatives, herbal purges, or just prayers and a cold compress while everyone avoids eye contact and starts carving your coffin. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. Break a bone or suffer a nasty wound? You're in real trouble. There's no anesthesia unless you count passing out from pain. Surgery is performed with knives that haven't been cleaned since the Crusades. Tools are heated over fire, not for sterilization, but because they look scarier that way. Antibiotics are centuries away, and germ theory hasn't been invented yet. Diseases are thought to stem from bad air or divine displeasure. Got a stomach ache? Must be your sinful thoughts. Hope you enjoy confessing while vomiting. If your condition worsens, expect more leeches, possibly some crushed beetles, and a priest at your bedside administering last rites, just in case. At this point, they're preparing for the ultimate cure, death. And if, by some miracle, you recover, everyone assumes God took pity on you. The doctor takes full credit, and the leech gets promoted. In the Middle Ages, medicine is less about healing and more about surviving the cure. After a long day of labor, lice, and leeches, it's finally time to eat. You shuffle back to your hovel, stomach growling, ready for the one joy left in life, a warm meal. Bad news. Your meal is probably trying to kill you. Let's begin with the basics. Food preservation doesn't really exist. There's no fridge, no freezer, just salt, smoke, or the hope that winter air keeps things fresh. Your meat, if you're lucky enough to have any, has been hanging for days, covered in flies, marinated in questionable brine, and possibly shared with a rat or two. Bread is the cornerstone of the medieval diet, but even that isn't safe. In bad harvest years, desperate peasants bulk it up with bark, sawdust, or even clay to make it stretch. And if it's rye season, there's a bonus. Ergot, a fungus that causes convulsions, hallucinations, and sometimes death. It's like eating bread laced with LSD and tetanus. Vegetables? Only if they're in season. And you know what's always in season? Turnips. So many turnips. Boiled, mashed, or floating in pottage, which, if you recall, is basically a hot swamp of mystery ingredients that's been simmering since your great-grandfather's funeral. Fruit might be available in the fall, but it rots quickly, and sugar is rare, expensive, and hoarded by the rich to show off their blackened teeth. Dairy is another gamble. Fresh milk spoils in hours. Butter and cheese fare better but are loaded with bacteria. People eat them anyway because, frankly, it's either that or chew your boot leather. And let's talk about seasoning. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, or nutmeg are worth more than gold. For the average peasant, flavor comes from onions, salt if you're lucky, and pain. Most meals taste like wet burlap sprinkled with sadness. But food isn't just a health hazard, it's a political one. Game animals are off-limits unless you're nobility. Poach a rabbit from the Lord's forest, and you're not just stealing, you're challenging the feudal system. The punishment? Fines, mutilation, or worse. So while the nobility feasts on swan, peacock, and wine-soaked pork, you're chewing on yesterday's porridge, wondering if that crunch was a pebble or just your last molar giving up. Eating in the Middle Ages isn't about nutrition. It's about survival and trying not to hallucinate your way into the afterlife. In the Middle Ages, every second of your existence is a test, not a blessing. Picture this. You've hunted a simple rabbit, just enough food to survive another day. But that animal, though caught with your own hands, doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the Lord, the noble, or the church. If you're caught poaching, it's not just a fine. You could be imprisoned, whipped, or straight up hanged. That's right, your dinner could become your death sentence. So when you sit down to eat your gray, suspicious stew by flickering firelight, remember, every bite is a gamble. But you eat anyway, because hunger always wins. In the Middle Ages, food doesn't nourish you. It tests you. It dares you to survive another day, to keep pushing through rot, worms, and the risk of execution, just for the privilege of not starving. Evening settles in, and you think the worst is over. You worked until your hands bled, ate your questionable stew, and now it's time to rest. Wrong. God is watching. So is the priest. And so is your neighbor Agnes, who will absolutely report you if you miss Mass. In medieval Europe, religion isn't just part of life, it is life. The church dictates your calendar, your laws, your education, if you can read, and every step between birth and death. Think of it as your spiritual landlord. And guess what? You're always behind on rent. Every day is structured around prayer bells. If you miss one, it's a sin. Ate meat on Friday? Sin. Had a dream about your neighbor's wife? Double sin. And hell? It's not some vague afterlife. It's vividly described. Rivers of fire, lakes of boiling blood, demons with pitchforks, and eternal screams. So you kneel. You pray. You suffer. And you hope it's enough. And if you thought being a medieval peasant was hell, try doing it as a woman. Same dirt, disease, and despair, but with added childbirth, invisibility, and zero rights. From the moment a girl is born, her future is locked in. Marry young, bear children, serve your husband, die exhausted. Education. Forget it, unless you're rich and locked in a convent. Most girls stop learning after they figure out how to churn butter and stitch torn tunics. Marriages happen early. Like, disturbingly early. Being betrothed at 12 and pregnant at 14 isn't shocking, it's expected. Love doesn't matter. Land and livestock do. Your voice, not part of the equation. Once married, you're not a partner. You're property. Your job, produce heirs, feed the family, clean the home, and shut up. Complain too much, and you're not just annoying, you're a witch. And being labeled a witch isn't some social slap on the wrist. It's a death sentence. Drowning or burning. Pick your poison, depending on the local mood. Childbirth? A horror story. There's no prenatal care, no anesthesia, no clean tools. The midwife does what she can, but complications often end in death. For you, your baby, or both. And if you survive, congrats. Now you're responsible for nursing, cleaning, cooking, and working the fields, while covered in lice and praying you don't bleed out next time. If you're single, you're suspicious. If you're outspoken, you're dangerous. And if you're smart, you're a threat. Because in the Middle Ages, being a woman isn't just harder. It's almost impossible. Imagine being a woman in the Middle Ages. If you're widowed, you're vulnerable. If you're outspoken, you're dangerous. Women who didn't conform were often accused of witchcraft, especially if they had herbal knowledge, a strong personality, or simply made eye contact on a rainy Tuesday. The church didn't offer much refuge either. Even nuns lived under suffocating rules. No speaking without permission, no freedom of movement, and your spiritual worth was always considered inferior to that of men. In short, if you were a woman in the medieval world, you were expected to obey, reproduce, endure pain, and do it all with a smile. Because even in an age of universal suffering, women were somehow expected to suffer gracefully. You've already battled disease, filth, starvation, and maybe even an angry goat, but just when you think it can't get worse, here comes violence. Loud, public, and disturbingly normalized. The Middle Ages were not a peaceful time. Law and order? That mostly meant hoping the local lord wasn't in a bad mood. Violence lurked in the home, the streets, the battlefield, even in church disputes. Crime was common, and punishment was pure nightmare fuel. Steal bread? You might lose a hand. Accused of lying? Get ready for your tongue to be pierced. Gossip too much? You'll meet the scold's bridle, a metal mask strapped to your head, complete with a gagging bar. Accused of a serious crime like witchcraft or heresy? Congratulations, you're now enrolled in trial by ordeal. One method. Plunge your hand into boiling water and pull out a stone. If the wound doesn't get infected in 3 days, you're innocent. If it does, you're guilty. Another option. Get tossed into a river. Sink? Innocent, and probably dead. Float? Guilty, and now it's punishment time. Justice in the Middle Ages was less about truth and more like a horrific game show, where survival was the prize and the host hated you. Public executions were community events. People gathered to cheer on hangings, beheadings, or burnings. They even brought snacks. It was the medieval equivalent of watching reality TV, but with actual blood. Domestic violence? Totally accepted. Husbands were expected to discipline their wives and children. Street fights? Common. You could be beaten just for accidentally making eye contact with a nobleman's horse. And war? Always brewing. Local feuds, border disputes, crusades. Someone was always sharpening a sword in the name of honor, God, or just plain boredom. In the medieval world, violence wasn't a breakdown of society. It was society. Life was fragile, justice was arbitrary, and survival meant keeping your head down and avoiding anyone holding a club or wearing armor. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. If you somehow made it past all that, the filth, the beatings, the bleeding, and the burning, you still had one final chapter to face, an early and unglamorous death. Making it past age 40 made you a living legend. The average life expectancy hovered around 30 to 40, but this was skewed by the brutal reality that nearly half of all children died before turning 5. No vaccines, no antibiotics, and a winter could kill just as easily as a sword. If you made it out of childhood, you started working young, often as soon as you could walk. By your mid-20s, your back hurt, your teeth were gone, and your optimism had rotted faster than yesterday's stew. For women, childbirth was one of the deadliest threats. No pain relief, no medical intervention, just prayer, boiling water, and the hope that you wouldn't bleed out on a straw mattress. For men, it wasn't any safer. Farming injuries, minor wounds that turned fatal, angry neighbors with pitchforks, a random crusade, even walking to the market could be lethal. You might run into a drunken noble, a bandit, or a tax collector with a grudge. Plague. A single outbreak could empty entire cities overnight. Famine. A bad harvest could starve entire regions for months. Even eating could kill you. One bite of spoiled grain, and you'd spend your final hours hallucinating and screaming at the ceiling. Funerals, if you were lucky, were quick and practical. No embalming. No coffins. Just a shallow grave, a muttered prayer, and a race against time before the next body arrived. That's how life ended for most people, quietly, painfully, and anonymously. And now, you've made it to the final part of your journey, the medieval dream, if you can call it that. You've woken up in filth, relieved yourself in a bucket, brushed your teeth with pure hope, nearly fainted from hunger, labored until your spine gave out, prayed not to get plague, and narrowly avoided execution for owning a squirrel. Still dreaming of becoming a knight? Think again. That romantic version of the Middle Ages, gallant warriors, elegant ladies in towers, feasts in candlelit halls, is pure fiction. The real medieval world was rough, unfair, and ruled by hierarchy. Born poor? You stayed poor. Born rich? You still might die from soup. Castles were basically cold stone prisons filled with fleas, smoke, and loveless marriages. Sure, nobles had fancier clothes and drank wine, but they were just as likely to die from a stupid accident or a petty war. Simpler times? Not simple. Everything took longer. Everything hurt more. Even chewing could be risky. And if, by some miracle, you had a quiet moment to dream of something better, good luck. No social mobility. No modern medicine. No internet to look up, "Why am I dying?" You lived, suffered, and died within a few miles of where you were born. And yet, somehow, through all the chaos, people still found ways to laugh, to fall in love, to sing, and to dream. Not because life was easy, but because human beings are stubborn, hopeful creatures. Even in the darkest ages, they found light. So tonight, when you crawl into your soft bed with running water and antibiotics, maybe whisper a thank you to the modern world and to your ancestors, because they endured lice, leeches, lords, and lunacy, so you wouldn't have to. In a time when absolute authority ruled, her health was failing, and everyone knew a transition was inevitable. Each person had their own agenda. Catherine was constantly watched, her letters read, friendships monitored, and every move scrutinized. She couldn't trust her husband, her mother who still whispered in her ear on behalf of foreign interests, or even her servants. In this world, alliances could quickly turn into accusations. But Catherine was no fool. She learned to play the court's games quietly, cultivating allies in the shadows. She charmed military officers, befriended scholars, and earned a reputation for dignity and restraint, a stark contrast to her husband's childish tantrums and open disdain for Russian traditions. Behind closed doors, Catherine began reading Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Montesquieu. While others saw her as just a young consort, she was building a vision, not just for herself, but for Russia, a nation founded on strength, education, and reason. But there was a problem. The longer Peter lived, the longer Catherine remained in limbo, a powerless wife to a man unfit to rule. So she waited, observed, and planned. She knew the Russian throne wouldn't be inherited, it would have to be taken. In 1762, after nearly 2 decades of waiting and maneuvering, Catherine saw her moment and seized it with breathtaking precision. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. Empress Elizabeth had died, and Peter, now Peter III, was finally Tsar. But his reign quickly unraveled. Within months, Peter alienated the church, insulted the nobility and the army, and lavished praise on Prussia, Russia's longtime enemy. He reversed key policies, humiliated clergy, and openly discussed divorcing Catherine to marry his mistress. The court, wary of his erratic behavior, turned cold. The army, loyal to Catherine, whispered discontent. Even ordinary Russians saw Peter as a foreign puppet mocking their traditions. Watching all this, Catherine made her move. In July of that year, while Peter was away at his summer palace, Catherine launched a bloodless coup. Supported by key military officers, including her lover Gregory Olaf and his influential brothers, she rode through St. Petersburg in full regalia, was proclaimed Empress Catherine II, and won the loyalty of the powerful imperial guard. Peter, caught off guard and without allies, surrendered within days. He was taken into custody and shortly after died under mysterious circumstances. Officially, it was said to be hemorrhoidal colic. Unofficially, murder. Catherine was now empress, not by birth or marriage, but by will, wit, and audacity. A foreign-born woman with no legitimate claim had taken the Russian throne without firing a single shot. But her real challenge was just beginning. She had to turn this bold seizure of power into a lasting legacy. Would Russia accept her? Would the nobility respect her? Could she hold the empire together without falling victim like her husband? Catherine understood that power gained through intrigue could be lost just as easily. She needed to rule not as a schemer, but as a visionary. So began her transformation from careful conspirator to reforming empress, one who would redraw borders, embrace the Enlightenment, and redefine what it meant to be a woman in power. Once crowned, she could have rested on her throne, but she didn't. She had something much bigger in mind than just sitting on a throne. She wanted to transform Russia, not just militarily or politically, but intellectually. While Peter had worshipped Frederick the Great and toy soldiers, Catherine idolized Voltaire, Diderot, and the bold thinkers of the Enlightenment. She believed deeply in reason, progress, education, and the monarch's role as a servant to the people, even though she ruled with absolute authority. But Catherine didn't just read Enlightenment philosophy, she lived it. For over 15 years, she corresponded directly with Voltaire, flattering him while defending her autocracy. She invited Diderot to her court and even bought his entire library to support him financially. Behind closed doors, Catherine studied legal texts, debated reforms, and crafted policies aimed at modernizing the empire. Early in her reign, she launched efforts to codify Russian law, founding the Legislative Commission in 1767, an ambitious project to rewrite the entire legal code. Catherine's own nakaz, or instruction, was a political manifesto in disguise, calling for equality before the law, denouncing torture, and emphasizing rulers' responsibility to serve the common good. For an 18th-century Russian empress, these ideas were radical. But Enlightenment ideals had to survive the harsh realities of Russia, a vast, feudal, deeply conservative land ruled by nobles who preferred their serfs exactly where they were, beneath them. Catherine understood this perfectly. While she pushed for reform, she moved carefully. She abolished some forms of torture, expanded secular education, and built schools and libraries, but she also reaffirmed the nobility's control over serfs to keep them loyal. This was her delicate balancing act, a philosopher queen in public, a practical empress in private. She walked a tightrope between lofty ideals and political survival, between the glittering salons of Paris and the harsh politics of Moscow. Her vision for Russia was bold but always calculated. In many ways, Catherine wasn't trying to make Russia European. She was trying to make Russia modern on her terms. That meant reform, yes, but with an iron hand cloaked in a velvet glove. Catherine wasn't content with reforming Russia internally. She wanted to expand it outward, creating an empire worthy of fear, admiration, and envy. While Peter the Great had opened a window to the west, Catherine aimed to knock down the walls. Under her leadership, Russia's borders stretched wider than ever before. She waged wars not just to defend her crown, but to reshape Europe's map. One of her most significant campaigns was against the Ottoman Empire. These wars, fought in waves throughout the 1760s and 1770s, weren't just about territory. They were about influence. Catherine saw herself as the liberator of Orthodox Christians living under Muslim rule, and the rightful protector of Eastern Europe. Under generals like Alexander Suvorov and Grigory Potemkin, Russia captured key regions including Crimea, the northern coast of the Black Sea, and gained access to warm water ports, long coveted by Russian Tsars. These victories were symbolic as much as military. Each conquest sent a message. Russia was no longer Europe's distant, backward cousin. It was a continental power. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. Catherine also turned her gaze westward. Through a series of deals and diplomatic maneuvers, she participated in the partitions of Poland, carving up the struggling Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth alongside Austria and Prussia. By the Third Partition in 1795, Poland was erased from the map, and Russia gained vast new lands and millions of new subjects. But Catherine didn't conquer only with armies. She colonized with ideas. New cities were built, trade routes expanded, and German settlers invited to cultivate Russian farmland. The empire became a mosaic stretching from the icy Baltic to the sun-drenched shores of the Black Sea. Through it all, Catherine remained the central force, reading reports, issuing orders, and personally directing the empire's course. Overseeing the shape of her expanding empire, Catherine faced critics who accused her of being power-hungry, even imperialistic. But to Catherine, expansion wasn't mere ambition, it was destiny. She believed a great ruler was measured not just by ideas, but by borders. She didn't just want to rule Russia, she wanted to remake it as a civilized empire, feared by its enemies, respected by its peers, and loyal to her alone. Despite her brilliance and power, Catherine the Great was just as famous for what happened behind palace doors, and not all of it was whispered quietly in libraries. Her private life became one of the most talked about aspects of her reign. She had lovers, not just one or two, but a carefully curated parade of them, many decades younger, often handsome, and sometimes politically influential. Catherine didn't hide them. In fact, she often rewarded her favorites with titles, estates, and pensions, if they behaved well. If not, they were quietly dismissed, sometimes with a polite thank you and a promotion elsewhere. Among her most important lovers was Grigory Potemkin, a man as brilliant as he was bold. Their relationship blurred the lines between romance, politics, and partnership. Some historians believe they may have even married in secret. Together, they shaped military campaigns, colonization projects, and the transformation of southern Russia. Potemkin wasn't just a lover. He was her co-ruler in many ways. Still, Europe couldn't look past the scandal. Gossip swirled, and satirical pamphlets painted Catherine as lustful, insatiable, even unhinged. After her death, the rumors only worsened, the most infamous being a grotesque and completely false tale involving a horse, spread by her enemies to smear her legacy. But why the obsession? The answer is simple. Catherine was a woman who wielded power unapologetically. In a world where female rulers were expected to be either saintly virgins or tragic figures, she refused to play the role. She lived, loved, and ruled on her own terms, and that made her dangerous. Ironically, while critics painted her as immoral, Catherine herself was deeply philosophical about love and sexuality. She believed pleasure was a natural part of life, and that personal relationships didn't have to threaten public responsibility. She separated emotion from governance, a feat few male rulers managed. In reality, her liaisons were often strategic. She surrounded herself with men who were loyal, capable, and politically useful. And when they ceased to be, she let them go, usually with a smile and a generous retirement. Catherine's love life didn't weaken her rule. It was part of her strategy, a blend of passion and power that made her unforgettable, envied, and feared. But for all her charisma and control, Catherine's reign was not without peril. In 1773, that peril came in the form of a bearded Cossack named Yemelian Pugachev. Pugachev was no ordinary rebel. He claimed to be none other than Peter III, Catherine's dead husband. According to him, he had survived the coup and now returned to reclaim the throne from the German usurper. The claim was absurd. Peter was long gone. But for Russia's oppressed and exhausted lower classes, the claim didn't have to be true. It only needed to offer hope. Pugachev promised liberation, an end to serfdom, lower taxes, and land for the common people. His words ignited a fire across the Volga River region, especially among the Cossacks, peasants, and old believers. At a time when the gap between nobles and serfs had widened brutally, his promises sounded like salvation. The Pugachev Rebellion became the largest peasant uprising in Russian history. Towns were taken, fortresses fell, nobles were slaughtered. For a terrifying moment, it seemed as if the empire itself might fracture. Catherine was shaken. This was not a foreign war she could win with cavalry and treaties. It was a revolt from within, her own people rising against the system she ruled. But Catherine did not panic. She acted swiftly and decisively. Catherine responded decisively to the Pugachev rebellion, dispatching professional military forces to crush the uprising with ruthless efficiency. By 1774, Pugachev's forces were defeated, and he was captured, displayed in an iron cage, and eventually beheaded in Moscow, a brutal public warning to anyone daring to follow in his footsteps. After the rebellion, Catherine doubled down on order and control. Her early hopes of liberating the serfs quietly faded into silence. The rebellion had revealed the harsh reality. Enlightenment ideals faced severe limits in a country still shackled by feudalism. From then on, Catherine leaned heavily on the nobility, trading loyalty for their absolute control over the serfs. This moment marked a turning point. The empress who once quoted Voltaire now prioritized stability over philosophy. Reforms became cautious, surveillance increased, and any hint of rebellion, even whispered, was ruthlessly stomped out before it could breathe. Though Pugachev lost his head, he left behind a stark warning that haunted Catherine. Power built on inequality was fragile, destined to be shaken by the storms of unrest. By the time Catherine the Great neared the final years of her reign, she had ruled Russia for over 3 decades, longer than any female ruler in Russian history. From the moment she seized power, Catherine defied expectations, reshaping her empire and redefining what a woman and monarch could be. Under her reign, Russia became a true European powerhouse. Its territory expanded by more than 200,000 square miles, swallowing Crimea, parts of Poland, and vast stretches of the Black Sea coast. These were not mere military victories. They were strategic moves securing warm water ports and reshaping trade routes essential for Russia's future influence and prosperity. Yet, Catherine's legacy was not written only on maps. She left a profound cultural imprint. She helped found the Hermitage Museum, amassing one of the greatest art collections in Europe, and corresponded with the greatest minds of the Enlightenment. Her court became a center of sophistication, art, and intellectual ambition. In a country often viewed as backward by Western Europeans, Catherine put Russia firmly on the cultural map. She modernized education by founding schools for girls and promoted the printing of books. She even introduced smallpox inoculation to Russia, publicly receiving the vaccine herself, an act of scientific bravery in her time. Despite her admiration for Enlightenment ideals, Catherine never freed the serfs. In fact, she extended serfdom deeper into Russia's territories. Her reforms, while impressive, were mostly top-down, designed to polish the empire without fundamentally transforming its feudal foundations. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. Still, Catherine's rule brought both stability and ambition. She understood that power was not inherited, it was crafted, managed, and constantly defended. She ruled not by divine right but by force of will, political brilliance, and relentless determination. This blend of strategic ruthlessness and cultural vision secured her place as one of history's most unforgettable rulers. Feared, respected, and endlessly fascinating, Catherine the Great was called many things: a usurper, a tyrant, a reformer, a seductress. But above all, she was effective. When she died in 1796, Russia was wealthier, larger, and more formidable than it had been in centuries. She left behind a secure throne, an expanded empire, and a legend that would endure for centuries. Catherine didn't just reign. She ruled with intellect, strategy, and an unapologetic grip on history. In doing so, she became more than an empress, she became a myth. Despite all her power, expansion, and enduring legacy, Catherine was still at her core a woman navigating a man's world and reshaping it in her image. Behind the imperial portraits and state decrees was someone deeply aware of how precarious her position was. She was not born Russian. She came to the throne through a coup. She ruled an empire that didn't want a woman in charge. And yet, she not only endured, she thrived. Catherine was never content to be ornamental. She read constantly, wrote endlessly, and never stopped learning. Her daily schedule was intense: hours of reading reports, corresponding with foreign powers, editing state papers, and managing a court filled with rival factions. She wasn't content to simply sit on the throne. She worked the throne like a stateswoman born to it. She was also, in many ways, lonely. She surrounded herself with courtiers, lovers, and artists, yet wrote in her memoirs about how few people she could truly trust. Her son Paul, whom she distrusted and kept away from state matters, grew into a man she feared would undo all her progress. Her greatest emotional partnership with Grigory Potemkin faded into deep friendship, but his death in 1791 left a wound that never truly healed. Catherine crafted her image carefully. She understood the power of narrative and wielded it better than most monarchs of her age. She posed as Mother of Russia, enlightened monarch, warrior empress, and lover of the arts. But beneath those roles was a woman who had endured rejection, betrayal, scandal, and rebellion, and kept going. When she died in 1796, she left behind an empire transformed, but also questions. Could she have done more to end serfdom? Were her Enlightenment ideals compromised by politics? Was she more reformer or ruler? History remembers her by the title she never gave herself, the Great. It wasn't because she was flawless, kind, or just. It was because she took power and wielded it on her own terms in a time and place where women weren't supposed to have any. She didn't just wear the crown. She rewrote what it meant to deserve one. In the humid depths of the Chiapas jungle in southern Mexico, the ruins of Palenque whisper stories from the ancient Maya world. Towering temples rise above the canopy, their limestone faces eroded by time but still brimming with secrets. And in 1994, one of those secrets revealed itself. A team of Mexican archaeologists led by Fanny Lopez Jimenez was surveying Temple 3, a relatively modest pyramid next to the more famous Temple of the Inscriptions, the burial site of the mighty King Pacal the Great. The temple's throne wasn't expected to hold much until they noticed something odd, a sealed hidden chamber beneath the structure. No looters had touched it. It was pristine. When the archaeologists broke through and lowered themselves inside, they found a stone sarcophagus resting in silence. The air was heavy with the weight of centuries. As they opened the lid, red dust rose like smoke, brilliant, shocking red. The interior was covered in powdered cinnabar, a toxic mercury sulfide used ceremonially by the Maya. And lying within that crimson cloud was the skeleton of a woman. She had been buried with care and reverence. Her bones were fragile but intact, her skull still wearing a jade mask, and her body surrounded by funerary offerings. Necklaces, diadems, ear spools, all crafted from jade and shell. Everything about the burial screamed royalty. Yet, no name was inscribed. No glyphs identified her. It was one of the richest female burials ever found in Mesoamerica, and yet it was a total enigma. Why was she buried in red powder? Who was she? Was she a queen, a priestess, or perhaps even Pacal's wife? The researchers called her the Red Queen, and the name stuck. But even with modern forensics, they couldn't say for sure who she was, only that she had lived around the 7th century, during the golden age of Palenque. Unlike most Maya tombs, hers had been hidden, untouched, and purposefully isolated. Her burial wasn't just ceremonial. It was spiritual. This woman wasn't meant to be remembered with words. She was meant to be remembered through ritual, through color, and through the mystery she left behind. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. The most haunting feature of the Red Queen's tomb wasn't her jade jewelry or the silence of the sealed chamber. It was the red dust. A thick layer of powdered cinnabar covered everything. The sarcophagus, the walls, her bones, even the offerings around her. It clung like blood to stone. To the Maya, this was no accident. Cinnabar, made from crushed mercury sulfide, was one of the most sacred and dangerous substances in the ancient world. Its vibrant red color wasn't just visually striking. It symbolized blood, rebirth, and the life force that connected the human and divine realms. Red was sacred. It was the color of sunrise, of sacrifice, of life emerging from death. And it wasn't just symbolic, it was spiritual. Covering the dead in cinnabar was a ritual meant to transform the body, preserving it not for eternity but for transition. In Maya belief, death wasn't the end. It was a passage, a crossing into another cosmic layer. And so the Red Queen, whoever she was being prepared not just for burial but for deification. But there's another layer to this. Cinnabar is toxic. Repeated exposure can lead to mercury poisoning, tremors, hallucinations, even death. The Maya likely didn't understand the chemistry, but they felt its potency. It was volatile, powerful, dangerous. To bathe the corpse in it was to declare this person was no ordinary mortal. In Palenque, very few were buried with cinnabar. Pakel the Great, the mighty king whose pyramid dominates the site, was one. His body, like hers, was also saturated in the red powder. That detail alone drew speculation. Was the Red Queen his wife, his mother, or someone of equal divine status? Her skull had been placed on a layer of jaguar skin, another sacred symbol. Around her, bone needles, obsidian blades, and miniature jade figurines hinted at rituals performed either during her life or in her honor at death. Every part of her burial told a story without words. A story of power cloaked in secrecy. A woman prepared to cross into the underworld not in silence but in ceremony, drenched in the color of sacrifice. Surrounding the Red Queen's crimson-drenched remains was a world of silence, broken only by the gleam of jade, shell, and obsidian. These were not mere ornaments. They were offerings, each one carefully chosen to accompany her on the journey to the Maya afterlife, the Xibalba. At her sides were jade necklaces, heavy and cold, their polished surfaces still radiant after 300 years underground. Jade was not just beautiful, it was sacred. The Maya considered it a symbol of eternal life. It represented the green of maize, the vitality of the jungle, and the breath of the gods. Only the elite were buried with jade. For the Red Queen, it covered her chest, wrists, and ears, a clear sign that in life she wielded influence, perhaps even divine favor. One of the most haunting objects was the jade funerary mask placed delicately over her face. Unlike the golden death masks of Egypt, this one was subtle, constructed from dozens of tiny mosaic tiles arranged to mimic the contours of her skull. The mask served a ritual function, to protect the soul, to preserve identity, and to present her as divine in the eyes of the gods. Scattered near her bones were bone needles, obsidian blades, and shell artifacts. These could have been tools of ritual or symbols of her status as priestess, healer, or royal matriarch. One bone pin was engraved, faint but purposeful, a small echo of her voice lost to time. At her feet and along the edges of the tomb were ceramic vessels still sealed, likely once filled with offerings, food, drink, or incense to sustain her spirit beyond death. The Maya believed the afterlife was a journey, dangerous, layered, filled with challenges. These items weren't luxuries. They were necessities. To modern eyes, the tomb feels intimate, not overloaded but intentional. There was no gold, no chariots, no pomp, just items chosen with spiritual weight. It was a map for the soul. Through these treasures, we glimpse how the Maya understood death not as finality but as a transition of power. The Red Queen wasn't buried to be forgotten. She was being prepared to ascend. For all the grandeur of her tomb, the Red Queen left behind one haunting void. No name, no inscriptions adorned her sarcophagus, no glyphs on the walls identified her. She was clearly someone powerful. But who? From the moment her tomb was opened, the mystery endures. Enter her sarcophagus, an altar-like structure carved from limestone that echoes the grandeur of ancient Maya architecture. Scholars began piecing together clues, and the most compelling theory identifies the Red Queen as Zakbu Aar, the wife of Kinich Janab Pakel, known today as Pakel the Great, Palenque's most famous ruler. Zakbu Aar was more than just Pakel's consort. She was born into nobility and married into Palenque's royal dynasty at a young age. She bore at least 3 sons who all held high status and played a key ceremonial role during her husband's reign. If anyone deserved such an honored burial, it was her. Supporting this theory is the tomb's location, just a few feet from Pakel's grand burial in the Temple of the Inscriptions. This proximity suggests a deliberate pairing, husband and wife rulers even in death. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. Furthermore, Only 2 burials in Palenque were found with such intense cinnabar coverage: Pakal and the Red Queen. It is unlikely this was coincidence. Yet the mystery deepens with DNA tests conducted on both sets of remains, hoping to confirm their connection. The results were inconclusive. The woman's bones showed no direct maternal link to Pakal, but that didn't rule out a spousal relationship. Some argue she could have been Sak Kuk, Pakal's powerful mother who ruled Palenque as regent before he came of age. Others suggest she might have been a high priestess, sister, or royal ancestor whose name has been lost to history's erosion. Still, the strongest evidence points to Taku Aja, a queen by title, mother of kings, and spiritual counterpart to Pakal. The absence of her name may have been intentional. In Maya cosmology, the soul was believed to live on not through monuments but through ritual, symbol, and the whispers of the earth. Thus, the Red Queen remains suspended between legend and truth, a woman who ruled, remembered not in stone but in scarlet and silence. To understand the Red Queen, we must understand the world she came from, where Maya royal women held far more influence than commonly realized. In Maya civilization, politics was often a family affair. Royal women were not passive consorts but diplomats, priestesses, and power brokers. They conducted rituals, sponsored temples, and played crucial roles in maintaining dynastic legitimacy. Their bloodlines were political capital used to forge alliances and secure claims to the throne. Take Sak Kuk, for example, Pakal the Great's mother. When Palenque's throne was vacant, she took power herself and ruled as queen regent until her son came of age. She was no placeholder. She was a ruler in her own right, issuing decrees and overseeing construction projects. Without her, Pakal might never have risen. And she was not an anomaly. Across the Maya world, in places like Yaxchilan, Naranjo, and Calakmul, inscriptions show women performing major ceremonies, engaging in warfare, diplomacy, and sometimes ruling outright. Often portrayed in stele and murals wearing elaborate headdresses and regalia, they stood beside kings as equals, or sometimes even above them. Their names were carved in glyphs, remembered until colonial times, when much of that history was erased. This context casts the Red Queen in a new light. She may not have ruled by name, but her burial, rich, sacred, and positioned beside Pakal, suggests she was a central pillar in the royal order. Her jade mask was not mere decoration. It symbolized identity and power held in life and protected in death. Her bloodline may have been the very glue that held Palenque's dynasty together. In Maya civilization, a queen was not just a queen. She was a keeper of sacred lineage, a voice in ceremony, and often a bridge between gods and men. The Red Queen may be nameless, but in her world, she was never voiceless. The Red Queen wasn't just buried with treasures. She was buried in architecture laden with purpose, layered with Maya cosmology, ritual symbolism, and intentional design. Her tomb was not merely a grave but a gateway to eternity. Her body was discovered inside Temple 13, one of the smaller pyramids within Palenque's heart, yet its proximity to the Temple of the Inscriptions, the resting place of Pakal the Great, is telling. These temples were not built randomly. Their positioning was sacred, guided by astrology, myth, and dynastic legacy. Temple 13 rises modestly compared to its grand neighbor, but hides something even more intimate, a sealed crypt untouched by looters, perfectly preserved. The tomb was constructed deep within the temple's core, accessible only by a steep, narrow staircase. The descent into her burial chamber feels almost symbolic, a ritual journey downward into the underworld. The chamber itself is stark, made of cut stone and sealed tightly for over 1,130 years. No glyphs or murals cover the walls, no ornate carvings tell her story. But perhaps that silence was intentional. This was a space not for the living to interpret, but for the dead to transform. Next door, Pakal's coffin lid famously shows scenes of cosmic rebirth, while the Red Queen's tomb is more subdued, the focus inward on the body, on the cinnabar, and on the ritual of death itself. Yet there are subtle signs that speak softly, continuing her story in the quiet austerity of her tomb and the strength of her enduring legacy. The tomb reveals architectural cues that hint at its deeper meaning. It is aligned east to west, a symbolic path mirroring the sun's journey from life to death. This orientation is no accident. It represents the cosmic route guiding the soul from the realm of the living into the beyond. The chamber, small but powerful, conveys a deliberate sense of intimacy and reverence, a sacred space dedicated to someone of great importance. Maya temples were not merely physical structures but cosmological tools, bridges linking the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. To be buried inside one was to be elevated beyond the human realm, closer to the divine. Thus, the Red Queen's eternal home was no afterthought. It was a carefully crafted shrine where death became transformation. Her bones rest in stone, her essence in cinnabar, and her legacy in the very architecture, a temple that speaks without words, proclaiming that she mattered. For the ancient Maya, death was not the end but a sacred threshold to the underworld, known as Xibalba. This crossing was more than spiritual. It was political, cosmological, and deeply ritualized. Burial rites were choreographed events rooted in myth, designed to guide the soul through the perilous layers of the underworld. Maya texts and iconography reveal that Xibalba was no peaceful afterlife but a maze of darkness, rivers of blood, trials, and death gods. Only those properly buried, ritually prepared, and spiritually equipped could succeed in the journey. The Red Queen was interred wrapped in cinnabar, encased in stone, and surrounded by offerings, all signs of an elite burial. Moreover, the presence of bone needles and obsidian blades in her tomb hints at auto-sacrifice rituals, possibly symbolic tools representing rites she had performed in life or reenacted at her burial to empower her spirit. Her funerary mask, carefully assembled from jade tiles, was not merely decorative. It may have served as a spiritual vessel preserving her face and identity as she journeyed into the afterlife. In Maya belief, the face was the mirror of the soul, and the soul needed to be recognized by the gods. Ceramic vessels around her may have once held chocolate, maize, water, or polka to nourish her in the next world. Other items like stingray spines or shell trumpets likely represented spiritual tools, calls to the gods, or tokens of ritual communication. Burial was not just a farewell, it was a transformation. The Maya believed in cycles, death as seed, burial as planting, and the afterlife as rebirth. Kings and queens were often seen as earthly incarnations of gods, and in death, they returned to their divine origins. The Red Queen, covered in the color of blood, entombed in a pyramid, and honored with offerings, was being prepared for rebirth, not as a mortal but as a being tied to the sacred order of the cosmos. Her burial was not the end of her story, it was the beginning of her legend. Just a few steps away from her resting place lies one of Mesoamerica's most iconic tombs, that of Kinich Janab Pakal, known simply as Pakal the Great. His burial inside the Grand Temple of the Inscriptions is celebrated for its artistry, scale, and profound spiritual symbolism. What makes the Red Queen's tomb extraordinary is not only its contents but its location. Her sarcophagus was hidden inside Temple 3, directly adjacent to Pakal's monument. In a city like Palenque, where every temple was carefully positioned to reflect cosmic principles, this closeness was no coincidence. It was an intentional statement etched in stone. Many scholars believe the Red Queen was Sak-Kuk, Pakal's queen and trusted consort. While her tomb lacks inscriptions, the similarities between their burials are striking. Both wrapped in cinnabar, both entombed in pyramids, both buried with jade, and both treated with extreme reverence. These rituals mirror each other, as if two halves of a sacred narrative. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. Pakal's sarcophagus lid famously depicts him falling into the underworld tree, a cosmic scene of death and rebirth. The Red Queen's simpler tomb contains no such iconography, but the symbolism lies in their pairing. If Pakal represented the sun journeying through the underworld at night to rise again, then the Red Queen may have represented the moon, the feminine force that follows its own mysterious path in the sky. Together, they embodied a cosmic duality: masculine and feminine, king and queen, sun and moon, order and ritual. In Maya mythology, rulership was not singular but relational. Harmony in the cosmos required balance, and that balance extended into the dynastic court. By placing the Red Queen beside Pakal, the Maya were preserving not just a marriage but a cosmic partnership. Their proximity in death may have mirrored their roles in life: a queen not behind but beside her king, sharing not only a throne but a legacy. In their tombs, they speak without words, two souls wrapped in cinnabar and stone, joined across eternity. One of history's most sacred silences. Though her name was lost to time, the Red Queen of Palenque endures not as a forgotten relic but as one of the most enigmatic and powerful women of the ancient world. Her tomb, sealed for over 1,300 years, now whispers across centuries, inviting questions that grow louder with each discovery. She represents a mystery that resists full understanding. We may never know exactly who she was. No glyph carved her name. No stele told her story. Yet the care in her burial, the richness of her offerings, and the symbolism of her crimson-drenched bones all speak of a woman profoundly important, not merely as a wife or consort, but as someone who held real influence, spiritual weight, and royal blood. Today, the Red Queen forces us to re-evaluate assumptions. She is a reminder that in the ancient Maya world, women were not silent. They led rituals, governed cities, and shaped dynasties. While kings like Pakal have long taken the spotlight, the Red Queen's re-emergence reminds us that power did not belong to men alone. It flowed through mothers, queens, priestesses, and visionaries. Her legacy is more than the treasures she left behind are more than mere artifacts. They are a powerful conversation among archaeologists, historians, artists, and storytellers. Every jade bead, every layer of cinnabar, every architectural detail in the temple speaks deliberately. This woman mattered, and perhaps the most extraordinary part of her story is not what we know, but what we still don't. The Red Queen teaches us that history isn't just a collection of facts, it is a living puzzle, a shared human longing to connect with the past. Her legacy continues unfolding. Wrapped in red, the color of life, sacrifice, blood, and rebirth, her face once hidden behind a jade mask now stares back at us through science, art, and wonder. Nameless but not voiceless, mysterious but not forgotten, the Red Queen may have ruled a kingdom in life, but in death she rules something greater, our imagination. Her tomb was sealed in stone, her story written in silence. Yet, somehow she still speaks. Frida Kahlo was born on July 6, 1907, in the vibrant district of Coyoacán, then a village on the outskirts of Mexico City. Her childhood home, Casa Azul, the Blue House, was filled with color, contradictions, and quiet strength. It would later become a sanctuary, a battleground, and a museum dedicated to one of the most iconic artists of the 20th century. Frida was the third of 4 daughters born to Guillermo Kahlo, a German-Hungarian photographer, and Matilda Calderón, a devout Catholic of indigenous and Spanish descent. Her parents were opposites: Guillermo, reserved and intellectual; Matilda, religious and emotionally distant. Frida inherited her father's introspection and artistic eye, but also her mother's fierce resilience. As a child, Frida was imaginative, outspoken, and bold. She read voraciously and asked questions most adults avoided. But at 6 years old, she contracted polio, which left her right leg thinner and weaker, a physical difference she tried to mask with long skirts but never let limit her spirit. The illness left her bedridden for months, isolated from other children. During this time, she grew close to her father, who encouraged her to exercise, ride bicycles, and keep mentally sharp. Unlike most girls of her time, Frida didn't dream of marriage or homemaking. Her goal was to become a doctor. At 15, she enrolled in the prestigious National Preparatory School in Mexico City, one of few girls accepted. There, she stood out not only for intelligence but also for rebellious wit, radical thinking, and unique style. She joined a group of young intellectuals called the Cachuchas, who debated philosophy, literature, and politics. Frida was drawn to revolution and ideas challenging tradition. Even before the bus crash that would change her body and the fame that would define her legacy, Frida was already painting herself into the world with sharp edges, unapologetic ideas, and an identity too large to fit others' expectations. She wasn't just growing up in Coyoacán. She was preparing to remake herself entirely. On September 17, 1925, Frida Kahlo's life split in two, the girl she had been and the woman she was forced to become. That afternoon, she boarded a wooden bus with her boyfriend Alejandro Gomez Aries after school. They were laughing, teasing, possibly arguing. Frida never did anything halfway. Moments later, the bus collided with a streetcar. In an instant, her future unraveled into pain, metal, and silence. The crash was horrific. The streetcar crushed the bus against a wall, splintering wood and flinging passengers. Frida was impaled by an iron handrail that entered her left hip and exited through her pelvis. Her spinal column fractured in 3 places, her right leg shattered, her foot dislocated, collarbone, ribs, and shoulder broken or dislocated, and abdomen pierced. She was only 18. A man covered her with a borrowed overcoat. Another noticed her body sparkled, not from blood, but gold powder she had been carrying in a pouch, which exploded on impact, dusting her broken form with glittering ash. She was taken to the Red Cross hospital and underwent numerous surgeries over months. Weeks in a body cast, flat on her back, immobile, writhing with infection and uncertainty. The future she imagined, becoming a doctor, slipped further away with each passing day. Yet, in that stillness, something began to stir. Her father gave her brushes. Her mother rigged a special easel to hang above her bed. A mirror was placed on the canopy so she could see herself. There, lying in plaster and agony, Frida began to paint. At first out of boredom, then obsession. Her first subjects were her own reflection, because she was all she had. But what emerged was not vanity, it was survival. The crash had broken her physically, but it also opened a door into her own mind, her own body, and eventually the surreal language of pain and identity that would define her art. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect. The girl who wanted to heal others now began healing herself, one brush stroke at a time. As Frida Kahlo lay encased in plaster and steel, a body fighting itself with every breath, she began to paint. What started as therapy soon became a language, deeply personal, brutally honest, often hard to look at, which was exactly the point. Frida didn't paint pretty flowers or polite landscapes. She painted pain, her pain, physical, emotional, and existential. Her first subjects were. In this part of Frida Kahlo's story, the narration dives deep into the core of her art and personal life, revealing how her pain transformed into artistic expression. Frida didn't paint self-portraits out of vanity, but because, as she famously said, "I paint myself because I am so often alone and because I am the subject I know best." Her early works were small in scale, painted on tin or wood panels, inspired by Mexican retablos, devotional paintings meant to tell stories of suffering and miracles. But Frida turned this tradition inward. Her body became the canvas, her emotions became the altar. She painted herself as split, pierced, and bleeding. In one painting, she is impaled by nails like a modern-day martyr. In another, she floats in a barren landscape, tethered to a broken column, a metaphor for her shattered spine. Her art revealed pain unfiltered. Frida never sanitized the ugliness of trauma, but exposed it with beauty, defiance, and even humor. Each painting was a reclamation of her body, her experience, and her identity as a woman in a world that often tried to define her. She wasn't just telling her story. She was inventing a new kind of visual narrative that blended Mexican folk art, surrealism, medical illustration, and symbolism. Her paintings became dreamlike autopsies of her soul, framed in color, culture, and myth. By the time she recovered enough to walk again, painfully, Frida was no longer the girl who wanted to be a doctor. She had become an artist, and her art was unlike anything anyone had seen. She had taken the worst thing that had happened to her and turned it into a source of creation, transforming suffering into a sacred act of self-expression. In 1928, still recovering and only 21 years old, Frida met the man who would profoundly shape her life. Diego Rivera, Mexico's most famous painter and a towering figure in muralism. Diego was 20 years older, massive in stature and presence. Frida admired his work and boldly interrupted his scaffolding at the Ministry of Education to ask bluntly, "Do I have talent?" Diego looked at her paintings and said, "Yes, and not just out of kindness." He saw in her something rare, a raw, unfiltered voice full of rage, irony, pain, and beauty. Their relationship was as consuming as it was creative, marked by passion, chaos, and artistic growth. Frida once said, "I suffered 2 accidents in my life. One was when a streetcar knocked me down. The other was Diego." They married in 1929, a pairing outsiders described as an elephant and a dove. Diego, massive and unfaithful. Frida, sharp-tongued and fiercely independent, walking with a cane. Despite betrayal and heartbreak, their bond was legendary, filled with challenges, but also mutual belief in her as an artist and revolutionary. Diego supported Frida's art and encouraged her growth, but he was also endlessly unfaithful, even with Frida's own sister, Cristina. Frida was devastated but responded with her own affairs, both with men and women, including rumored relationships with Leon Trotsky and painter Georgia O'Keeffe. They divorced in 1939 but remarried a year later under different terms. This time, Frida kept her autonomy, home, money, and name. Their second marriage was less about traditional love and more about creative partnership and mutual respect. Despite the betrayals and heartbreak, Diego remained a constant force in Frida's life. He challenged her, wounded her, but also believed in her as an artist, revolutionary, and a woman redefining what painting could be. Together, they were not peaceful, but they were legendary. In the 1930s, Frida followed Diego on a journey north to San Francisco, where her art began to gain international recognition. The painful years, the betrayals, the relentless physical suffering, everything was woven into her work. She painted with brutal honesty, depicting her own wounds, emotions, and identity. She became a symbol of resilience, creativity, and raw human experience. Her legacy was not just in the canvases, but in how she lived and transformed pain into something universal, a language that continues to speak across generations. Detroit and New York were the cities where Diego Rivera completed his most famous murals, while Frida Kahlo faced the complexities of living abroad during a period of intense political and social turmoil. These years outside Mexico exposed Frida to American industrialism, excessive wealth, and the contradictions of capitalism, leaving her with deep political discomfort. Proud Mexican nationalist, committed communist, and admirer of indigenous traditions, she became even more disillusioned witnessing the opulence in the United States during the Great Depression, which devastated much of the country. In letters home, Frida mocked the culture's materialism and obsession with appearances, missing the grit, color, and contradictions of Mexico. While Diego painted enormous murals on factory walls, Frida focused on smaller, quieter revolutions, deeply personal works on tin and canvas, defining a sharp, surreal, emotional, and intimate style. During this time, Frida created some of her most iconic self-portraits. She didn't paint herself out of vanity but to survive, turning her identity into her landscape. Her body, constantly in pain from the accident, multiple surgeries, and a failed pregnancy in Detroit, became the center of her work. Her portraits showed her bleeding, fragmented, exposed, yet her face remained calm, direct, and unapologetic. One of her most powerful works, Henry Ford Hospital, depicts her lying on a hospital bed crying, surrounded by floating symbols of loss, a fetus, a snail, medical equipment, and a cracked pelvis. The painting is raw, graphic, and deeply emotional, a canvas that bleeds with truth. Back in Mexico, Frida immersed herself in leftist politics. She and Diego welcomed Leon Trotsky into their home during his exile. Frida wore traditional Tijuana dresses, indigenous garments, not just as fashion but as political and cultural statements. Her art was never detached from her beliefs. Her identity, body, and ideology were deeply intertwined in her work. While Rivera painted murals of revolution, Frida painted its human cost, the body in pieces, the mind on fire, and the self always staring back. In exile and illness, she became not just a painter of pain but a painter of resistance. When Frida Kahlo returned to Mexico in the late 1930s, she was no longer just Diego Rivera's wife. She had become a force, an artist whose work radiated raw honesty, surreal symbolism, and cultural identity. In her homeland, she fully embraced herself. Her Casa Azul in Coyoacán became a sanctuary of color and contradiction, with bright cobalt walls, yellow trim, Aztec statues in the garden, and monkeys and parrots wandering freely. The house was a living extension of Frida's imagination, blending tradition and rebellion, elegance and earth. Here she surrounded herself with pre-Columbian artifacts, folk art, and revolutionary books. She wore bold Tijuana dresses, flowers in her hair, and painted amid the scent of copal incense and mariachi music from the street outside. This period marked an explosion of creativity. Her paintings grew more intricate, symbolic, and political. Works like the two Fridas revealed a divided self, one Frida in European dress with a bleeding heart, the other in indigenous clothing, strong and composed. It was Frida's visual autobiography, a portrait of love, loss, and heritage. In 1939, she exhibited her work in Paris, where artists like Picasso, Breton, and Kandinsky praised her fiercely original style. Even among the surrealists, Frida stood apart. When André Breton tried to label her as one of their own, she pushed back. "They thought I was a surrealist," she said, "but I wasn't. I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality." Sharpened by pain and refusing to hide behind metaphor, in The Broken Column, Frida Kahlo presents herself split down the middle, her body pierced with nails, a cracked ionic column replacing her spine. Yet, her face remains stoic, her gaze unflinching. Pain for Frida was no longer just a subject. It became her constant companion, antagonist, and muse. Her political voice grew louder alongside her art. She joined the Mexican Communist Party, marched in demonstrations, wrote fiery letters, and boldly called out imperialism and injustice. When her health no longer allowed her to walk, she attended protests in a wheelchair, defiantly holding signs and shouting slogans. This fierce activism made her art inseparable from her beliefs, each brushstroke an act of resistance. In 1953, Frida was finally given her first solo exhibition in Mexico, a long-overdue celebration of her work. However, her health was so fragile that doctors forbade her attendance. Yet, true to her spirit, she arrived by ambulance, carried on a stretcher, and placed in the center of the gallery on her hospital bed. Dressed in traditional finery, surrounded by her own creations, she greeted guests with tequila, laughter, and a fire still burning in her eyes. Her final paintings were both childlike and harrowing. In Marxism Will Give Health to the Sick, she painted herself wearing a steel corset, cradled by the hands of Marx, casting away symbols of oppression. Her last known work was a still life of sliced watermelons, bearing the words "Viva la vida," long live life. Even facing death, Frida remained defiant, joyful, and political. On July 13, 1954, at the age of 47, Frida Kahlo died in the same place she had been born, La Casa Azul in Coyoacán. The official cause was listed as pulmonary embolism, but those close to her whispered of something deeper. She had been ill, yes, but also exhausted by pain, surgeries, and a long war with her own body. Just days before her death, weak and wheelchair-bound, she insisted on attending a political protest against the CIA coup in Guatemala, her clenched fist raised in defiance. Revolution was her final heartbeat. Her last diary entry was brief but piercing. "I hope the exit is joyful and I hope never to return." Her funeral was held at Mexico's Palacio de Bellas Artes, her body draped in the red flag of the Mexican Communist Party, watched over by friends, family, artists, and revolutionaries. Diego Rivera was inconsolable, calling her the greatest love of his life, despite the betrayals that had nearly broken her. In the years following her death, something extraordinary happened. Frida Kahlo refused to disappear. At first, her name was whispered only in art circles. Her works were too political for surrealists, too surreal for traditionalists. But slowly, her image, story, and defiance began to resonate. Through the 1970s and 1980s, as feminist scholars and activists reclaimed forgotten voices, Frida's became louder. She was no longer just a painter. She became a symbol of pain transformed into beauty, of feminism born through resistance, of Mexican identity celebrated without apology, of queerness, disability, revolution, and authenticity. Her face, unibrow, direct gaze, flowers in her hair, became iconic. Her home became a museum, her diary a sacred text, and her paintings now hang in the world's greatest museums. Frida Kahlo lived much of her life in Diego's shadow, but in death, she stepped forward. She didn't leave behind just paintings. She left a mirror and dared the world to look, not with pity or fear, but with fire. Today, her image is everywhere, on t-shirts, murals, dolls, memes, posters, and icons. But what makes her legacy powerful isn't just that people know her face, it's that they recognize the truth behind it. Frida never tried to be flawless. She didn't fit into boxes, and she never cared to. In a world demanding perfection, she gave us realness, raw, messy, vibrant, angry, joyful, and contradictory. She celebrated what made her different, her disability, her queerness, her politics, her culture, and transformed all of it into art that transcended borders and decades. She became more than an artist. She is a global symbol of defiance, feminism, cultural pride, and creative resistance. For queer communities, she is a fearless bisexual icon who lived openly and unapologetically when silence was demanded. For women, she is a reminder that power requires no permission. For disabled artists, she is proof that pain can fuel the brush, not stop it. And for Mexico, she is a reclaimed daughter, fierce folkloric spirit, forever part of the national soul. Her paintings, once dismissed as strange or too personal, are now among the most revered in the world. Works like the two Fridas, self-portrait with thorn necklace and hummingbird, and the broken column aren't just seen, they are felt deeply by anyone who has suffered and turned that suffering into something sacred. Frida lived on the margins and turned them into center stage. She embraced contradiction, a communist who wore gold, a woman betrayed who loved again, a body in pieces with an unbreakable soul. Through it all, she painted not just with color but with conviction. Frida Kahlo never asked to be a symbol. She simply told the truth about herself, and in doing so, she told the truth for millions who had never seen themselves reflected in art before. Now, when we see her face, we see courage, color, resistance. We see Frida, not gone, but immortal. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any content that brings life, art, and revolution to you. Leave your like to show that you support these powerful stories and help spread this message of courage and resistance to more people. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos and always connect.